Hello, San Antonio. This is Ken Carter. Sans Brad Burns again. Unfortunately, as before on our last episode, I mentioned his son was not feeling well this morning, and he is doing dad duty, which is awesome. And I always recommend. I probably spent too much time doing dad duty rather than work, but you know it's fun. We've got a great guest today that I have been eagerly anticipating coming in. Lorenzo Gomez III. We'll use it.
Yep.
The accomplished author, former racker, public speaker, and advocate of a walkable micro-district environment that I am also a big proponent for. But as always, tell us how you got to San Antonio. We really just like to talk about, this is about featuring people that are from San Antonio that are doing great things. Tell us about your history of San Antonio, the things that you love about it. We've talked about it a little bit, but let's
yeah. So, well, first off, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It's awesome to be here, and I want to just sort of lower the bar for everybody out there so they can, so we can exceed their expectations. But I grew up in San Antonio. I was born here. My parents were originally from Laredo, Texas. They moved here when they were real young, and my dad was an X-ray tech. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So they had 7 kids. I'm number 6 of 7. I'm the youngest. There was 4 boys, 3 girls. I'm the youngest boy, and so I had to share everything, and so I'm just
Were they equally spread out? Because I've got
yes.
6 kids, and I had a group of 4. Then we had one. Then we had
they're pretty even spread out. I mean, there's a couple that are 1 a year more, but
so you're still getting beat up by the oldest one.
Yes,
nice.
Yes. Actually, it's as I get older, we all get along so much. When you're young, you're just fighting over everything. And
my brother same way.
Oh yeah, you lent my CD to someone and I never got it back. There's some, still some family drama around that stuff. But
ours is more like you backhanded me when I had braces and made my mouth explode. But we love each other.
Well,
now.
mine was having to share clothes. I hated sharing clothes, and so it was like, oh, you stretched my shirt, so now I can't wear it anymore. You jerk. So, but it's all good. So
yeah.
But it's always I always say having that many siblings made me the world's greatest roommate. Like anytime I ever had to share anything, I'm like, this is nothing compared to what I grew up in.
Makes sense.
4 boys sharing a bathroom. So we grew up here, and I feel like I was the San Antonio kid for the most part that never left like a 13 block radius of my house. Other than if my parents took us, we would go to Laredo every other week to visit my relatives. But I say that as a way of saying I was very sheltered. I was very ignorant and naive about just the greater world. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so I
think that comes from a little bit though, being on the tail end of Gen X and the beginning of millennial. Because for sure, I feel it as a Gen Xer that I felt like we were pre-programmed into the life that we were supposed to lead, and little things I thought actors and stuff, they were just Californians. You don't go become an actor. You're like they were Californians.
Yes. Well, and it was the whole notion of diversity, right? I mean, I didn't even hear that word growing up, but it was everyone that I was around sort of looked like me.
Yeah,
you sort of ordered gringos and Hispanics, and so it was not very diverse. And then I grew up in SEISD district. I should have gone Whittier to Edison, and instead I got into the it was a sort of the first type of charter school, Health Careers High School, in the med center, because my dad was an X-ray tech for like 45 years. And so, I had wanted nothing to do with medicine, but my mom was like, "You're gonna go there because if you go to public school, you're gonna get killed." School. Yeah. So I went to Health Careers, and I was.
That's called good parenting.
Yeah. Oh, and I hated it. I want to play football, which I weighed like 50 pounds. I would have died, and so I was like, so I went to Health Careers, and I immediately became I would consider the most unacademic person, and that's. But it was great. I met a lot of really great people, and I met 2 of my best friends that really changed the trajectory of my career. And the first guy's name's Dax Moreno. He's my BFF to this day, and then another buddy who we're still good friends, Luke Owen, and they are the ones that got me into tech, which is interesting to have 3 dudes at Health Careers. And we just went the other way. And so it's funny, my friend Luke, who I love, he was running, and this is in 1998, 99. He was running an internet business from our yearbook class and made like $30,000.
No way.
As a high school kid. And this was when the internet was barely, like I still hadn't logged on.
Yeah.
And he was already so into it and, helped me install my first CD burner. And
it always amazed me, those guys that saw like the potential before. Because like a lot of people see the potential now because there's been a road paid for them.
Yes.
But like to have something so abstract at that time as the internet and like to be able to use it. It's crazy.
And that's what I loved about to this day. They're just two really smart guys that are, they're always thinking ahead. And Dax and I worked at two different HEBs, and he left HEB.
We shout out HEB.
Yeah, to the HEB partners out there.
I just went to the barbecue place for the first time.
I've heard about it. I heard it's awesome.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel so sorry for people that don't have this type of place. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like great barbecue, and it's like, yeah.
Nobody does it like
the
HEB.
brisket beans were.
Yeah, they're just there. They don't mess around. HEB is the we're so lucky to have them. And I was a partner at HEB number 5 for all the partners out there.
Which one is that?
It's Hildebrand, West Avenue in Fredericksburg. It's like in the.
So is that the 5th one that was in?
No, I forget how they do their naming conventions,
Okay.
but it's just.
That'd be interesting.
I used to just say it was the one in the hood, but now it's the Deco HEB. They sort of rebranded it.
Yeah.
But all of my siblings except one of them worked there, so I had to carry on the Gomez tradition. Cool. Yeah. But Dax and I were at different ones, and then he left and worked at. He called me one day. I remember because I was in produce when he called me. I was working at the produce department, and he was like, "Hey, dude, I left HEB. I'm at this computer store, and I'm killing it. I'm the youngest sales guy. I'm hitting my number. It's And he was like, and they're hiring, and I want you to come work here." And I was like, dude, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Like, do you know how fresh the cilantro is this season? Like, I'm not gonna, computer. And it was a Gateway computer store. They used to have a showroom
right there on San Pedro.
Yes, the San Pedro.
It's now I think a Jugs or something like that kind of restaurant.
Yeah.
That's exactly where it was.
So he did what a good friend does, which is he harassed me for like 2 weeks and was like, "Don't be an idiot." So I left. It was a 25-cent raise. Oh, I do remember that.
But
and then I
think about it though, like at that time, like HEB, like trying to get that was a career place to go to. Like back when there's still the notion of like start with a company, retire with a company.
Yeah, I remember my oldest brother told me a story of he was going to X-ray school while he was at HEB, and they offered him full time and he turned it down, and they were like, "Dude, but it's full time, and it was such a what a risky move.
Yeah.
And for me, it was fun because at the time you don't know these things, but I was betting on Dax and Luke. I was like, these dudes are so smart. I sort of trust them because they just know more than I do. And so I went to Gateway, and I was probably like, at the Apple Store now, sort of Gateway was the precursor, right? Mm-hmm. It was a showroom. There was no inventory. But instead of having
cow print everywhere,
the cow print, the cow spotted box, but now there's a guy with an iPad, and he's like, "Hey, let me put your name in there." Well, I was the guy with a clipboard, like analog, and so I'd say, it's going to be 45 minutes. Dax is going to talk to you. But the cool thing was I learned about computers, and I started to see this new industry. I'm sure it was already it was already a thing, but I was discovering it for the first time. And then we met a guy there who'd moved from Iowa. His name was James Brem. And he was one of the top sales guys. And then he left, and then he called me and said, "Hey, I'm at this tiny little company called Rackspace that you've never heard of." And he said, and I quote, "It'll probably go out of business, but it's super wild. It's like the Wild West. You get to wear whatever you want. They buy us food every day." And he was like, "I think you should come work here." And I was like, I don't know about that. And he said, "Well, just come for an interview." So I went for an interview, and I had really no business working there. I didn't know what they did. Even after I had Googled what hosting was, I still didn't know what it was. And so he basically sort of strong-armed them and said, "You're going to hire my friend."
The only reason I got a job there is because I sold pagers.
Okay, yeah, the tech. Tech
had nothing to do, but for me, it was we'd sell the numbers.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I don't know if you remember JJ, the king of beepers.
Yeah.
So he was my customer. Like I would sell him 5,000 phone numbers for $1 a piece, and then he would resell them for $5 a piece and make $4 a number, right?
Yeah.
Which was hosted exchange.
Yes.
It's the same concept.
Yes. It's just
if I didn't have that reseller, that's the only job in Rackspace that I was qualified for was that one email reseller program because they were bringing it from Blacksburg.
I remember sort of the precursor to the cloud being our customers reselling virtual hosting.
It
was
is.
like just chopping it up.
It's the same thing.
And I thought, oh, well, they just sort of, have better software around it now. And so, so that I sort of, and I Rackspace is a huge part of my story because I was a very, I wouldn't say I was a bad student. I was a very unmotivated student. I hated school. I hated homework. I have this weird, I despise the concept of homework. And so the whole notion of, you know what, I'm not going to go do homework. I'm going to go work and learn stuff. And so I couldn't wait to not be in school.
Yeah.
And Rackspace really changed my life because it was my school while I was learning. And it really changed the trajectory of my life because and that sounds very dramatic, but it really was true. I had only been on a plane once. My brother took me to Vegas. And then I worked at Rackspace, and they were like, "We're sending you to London," and I was petrified. I mean, I had never. I was so scared I was going to get lost, and I found out there was another guy that they were sending, so I made them change flights so I could grab onto his leg, but it was cool. But again, it was sort of broadening my world.
And where else had you been in the United States before that, other than Austin?
Other than
and Laredo, just other than South Texas.
That was really it. It was. I think I had been to Corpus once,
so South Texas,
but I had never been anywhere else.
That's
never.
Crazy, and that's not. And that's what's interesting because it's not uncommon.
Yeah,
my son had a soccer team, and half the team had never been anywhere outside, and we started taking them all over the country and stuff, and it's crazy. And to your first trip is international. It's not.
Yeah, it was so. Matter of fact, I remember when I before I got to health careers, one of my older sisters was the first one of the last 3 to go to health careers, and she started working at a bagel shop, and I didn't know what a bagel was. I'd never seen one, and she comes home with these bagels, and I was like, let me get this straight. It's shaped like a donut. It looks like a donut. But it's not a donut. And she's like, no. and I remember thinking to myself, this is so rare. And then I got all West Side on her. I was like, you think you're better than us? You think these weird white people bagels are better than us? And she was like, no, it's really good. And had a sandwich. It was awesome. But I had never experienced anything like that, much less outside of the city. Seeing a real skyline or. And actually, Rackspace is funny. I had never been to the Alamo until I worked at Rackspace downtown, and then
again, not that uncommon.
Yeah, I walked up and like everybody says, oh, I thought it'd be bigger than that. it's real small.
It's real small.
So it's but Rackspace really was this special place that changed my life. It gave me a career, it gave me skills, it gave me a network, and it gave me the confidence to explore more things. And I feel like that's really what all the stuff that I do. That I'm involved in, that's secretly what I want is I want a future Lorenzo to have more opportunity. There's a state rep, Diego Bernal. He has a great quote. He says, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. And I think that's so true. I was very fortunate to get an opportunity to do these things. But there's someone on the south side, west side, east side that are way smarter than I am. They just didn't have the opportunity I have. And my great hope is that some of the things that we're involved in brought in that opportunity.
Well, those things are countless. Really, what's crazy is when you said this at the when Dax was telling you about it, it's probably going to fail. And and if you think now, a couple decades later, it hasn't. It's pretty much a failed because the world has changed.
Yes.
No fault to what was built at the time.
Right.
The world changed. Right. But if you take that as a center point and then expand out to what Dax has done, to what you have done, to what Pat Matthews has done, and all of these people that have expanded out from there and with geekdom and all of the things that you've been a part of, the Rackspace has been. You say it as that really changed your life. It changed the trajectory of San Antonio.
Yeah, it really did.
I don't think we have a Pearl if we didn't have a Rackspace.
Yes, I agree with that
in a lot of ways.
Yes, it really it sort of proved that you could have knowledge workers. It proved that you could have.
We're not a blue collar.
We're not a blue collar. You
you
can recruit people. I think there was a season where. I think we had the brand of being the call center capital of the world, which is really bad. But Rackspace wasn't that. We had the idea people here. We had the founders here. We had, just really, really brilliant, just really incredible people that I would have never gotten to meet. And so I agree with you. I think it changed the trajectory of the city in a positive way.
There were so many entrepreneurs there.
Yes.
Is the thing. It's
Yes.
like, yes, there was a bunch of quote unquote there were a bunch of rackers.
Yes.
Because there was a different mentality, and but there was a lot of entrepreneur-minded people that really wanted to make a difference.
I think, Graham used to say his hope was that Rackspace would do to San Antonio what Dell did to Austin. And I think that it's just the scale was much smaller.
It's the San Antonio version.
Yes. Because, there used to be a phrase for the people that, the amount of millionaires that they created, they call them the Dellionaires. Mm-hmm. And that was really sort of the original seed investors of the Austin scene. But there was just so many of them because it was such a bigger company. But you still see people that were former Rackspace people, investing in the city. Pat Matthews is a great example, and creating jobs here. And so I do think that part of that did come to fruition, which I was never even looking at the world that way. Graham was always sort of a visionary.
And this is something you done. One of the things that's great about it, there's actually a great book about The Rack We Built by Lorenzo Gomez III. You can still get it online.
That's right.
This is
available on
This
Amazon.
is my copy, which I've read in the past, and I brought it today because I'm gonna have you sign it later for sure. But and it's because it's important to you.
Yeah.
It's been important to this city, and I think it opened your mind, like going to like places like London and going to New York and things, and experiencing those types of cities.
Yeah.
And the culture that they create.
Yes.
It's kind of brought you into the next phase of your life.
Oh, 100%. I mean, so early on at Rackspace around 2002, my boss came up to me and she was like, "Hey, we have an office." There was probably 10 people in the London office at that time. And there was one account manager. I was hired probably as the seventh or eighth account manager for the whole company. And she said she's going on holiday, which as an American, I didn't know what that meant, which means like vacation, but like a long time. So she was going for a whole month. They're letting her off for that long. So they said, "Hey, we need someone to go cover her accounts." And she didn't say this to me, but in hindsight, she should have said, "And you're the only loser with no wife, no kids, no dog, no house. So you have nothing going on, so we're going to send you." And I remember she said, "Do you have a passport?" And I said to her, "What's a passport?" And I didn't even know the concept existed. And she was like, "Oh boy." And I remember she drove me. She was such an incredible, well, it still is. Her name is Anna Bowman. And she drove me to the FedEx on Broadway and helped me fill out my passport application because I was so nervous. I didn't know. It was that small San Antonio dude.
Yeah.
And again, just these little things that I'll never forget it because it was such a pivotal moment in my life. And so they sent me to the UK, and then while I was there, the managing director, we just really got on well. I mean, it was such a small office, and he was like, "Hey, we want to give you a 5-year work permit. Come work here full time." And the theme of my career was beating it. I was like, "No, it's a dumb idea. There's no. What are you talking about? Like, I'm not gonna. My mom's gonna be so mad if I leave. San Antonio," which she was. And so he would come. He would come every quarter. He would come for the Rackspace meetings, and he would come by my cubicle and renew the offer. And I would always politely decline. But there was one woman, the great Jake Gracia, and we're still friends to this day. And she was my cubicle mate. And, she was like the first worldly person I'd ever met. And she was from Chicago. And she said pop, instead of soda.
Yeah.
But she had lived in Italy, and she had, a fashion career in New York. And, she was a very worldly. Cosmopolitan person. She was like my big sister still is to this day. And this one time he came and asked me to move to the UK. And I politely declined. As he walked away, she just read me the riot act. She was like, "You're being a complete idiot. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And most people don't get the opportunity to travel the world on someone else's dime. And I know why you don't want to do it." And she said, "You're afraid. Mm-hmm. And you're afraid of missing out." And she was, "I want you to know you're going to go to the UK, you're going to come back, and all your friends are going to be hanging out at the same places, talking about the same stuff, drinking the same beers. Like, you're not going to miss anything." And for some reason, because I knew she had my best interest in mind, like she wasn't being mean to me. It really was a hard truth that I needed. I was like, you know what? That makes sense. Yeah. So I moved to the UK. And in hindsight, the UK, and specifically London, it's this visual, overwhelming version of what real urbanism is. The notion that, the first time I met we're still friends, a Norwegian guy named Jan Anderson. And this guy rolls up to the Rackspace UK office in full Lycra with his bike. And I'm like, what is, and he's like, I don't own a car. And he was like, to this day, I've never driven a car in my entire life. I've only lived in cities with public transportation. And my little San Antonio brain just exploded. And I was like, that's crazy, because in San Antonio, I would just think you're poor. Right? That means you're poor and you're desperate, and so you have to use your bicycle. But this was a lifestyle choice, and I thought, this is rocking my world right now. And then it made me sad. I was like, oh, what is he though? I could never recruit this guy to San Antonio. He would never survive. You would have to have a car and break, And I started seeing these elements of urbanism. At the time, I didn't know what they were. I just thought, this is different, and it's weird, but it's also super cool. And this guy speaks 4 languages, and he's a self-taught SQL Server programmer. And so this guy is not a chump, right? Yeah. This guy, he's got something to him. And so when I moved back and I started working for Graham and Geekdom, an 80/20 foundation, I started remembering all the things in the urban world of London that I went, there's no reason why some of these things wouldn't work here. Matter of fact, there's a lot of them that we need. This whole, the notion of reliable, real scalable public transportation is just one of them. The whole 3 years I lived there, I didn't own a car, and it was no big deal. And I remember there were people in the office that were really awesome, brilliant, came from great families. You could tell that they had money, but they worked hard. But some of them had cars, but most of the time they were taking the tube every chance they could, or on the weekends they were taking. And that blew my mind. That I was like, man, why is this person in San Antonio would be beneath them? Yeah. And here it's part of the culture. Anyways, and so it sort of inspired me to say, in the work that I do now, I'm just trying to capture a little bit of that goodness that I saw. This whole notion of the high street of, you have a butcher shop next to a produce shop, next to a cheese shop, next to a bakery, next to a wine bar, next to a pub, and they're not big. It's just enough for that entrepreneur to support it. But I can walk, I can go at all, and I go, this is not rocket science. They've been, cities have been doing this for millennia, and in San Antonio, we sort of make these islands, we chop big parking lot, and but it's funny because Rackspace was this special company that I didn't know was giving me a career, educating me on tech, but I also didn't know it gave me a free sort of urban planning degree, on the side. And that was just by, a byproduct of me living over there.
Well, do you think there's going to be also kind of a natural evolution into these micro districts like you're talking about? Because we have HEBs are great and everything like that, and we're having more and more automation and the AI and this and that, and having just that little small, where that human experience. Yes. Right? Because right now it's still a supermarket, and like you do have great experiences at HEB and everything, but like going to that butcher, if you could get yes. something reasonably priced and yes. and really knowing it's grass fed and all these other things, like I think that would be people's preference, to be able to buy today, to cook to that night, and go on for the next day.
Yeah, I mean, Ken, I have so much to say about this. I think there's a couple of really, really important social issues that you would not ever triangulate back to real estate, but they really matter. One of them is there's an epidemic of loneliness. And I think one of the contributors to it is the fact that we design modern cities as these islands. And so, in urban development, there's this concept of the third space. It's not home, it's not work, it's a third space. And a good example is just a good coffee shop, right? I hang out there. But what happens is the good ones, they create the conditions for you to meet people and talk to people. And that is what our world is desperate for. But the modern real estate engine is not designed for third spaces. It's designed for, let's make it efficient. Let's get it as big as possible. Let's get you in and out so we can get the next customer. And that's why places like co-working spaces, have really exploded, is because people are craving. And in cities that have this type of density, they already have it, right? The pub is sort of like that. It's always been a third space where you go there, and even if you don't drink, your buddies are there and you talk. And it's not about getting hammered, right? It's about people. And so I think that...
It was Boneheads at the time.
It was Boneheads, yes. and Hemingway's, a data point. Yeah, that's right.
It's the
same thing. People want
to walk right after work. You walk right across the street.
Yes, and that's what people want.
Keep working.
And keep working, exactly. And there's not a lot of places for it, but what's happening is specifically young people, they are moving to cities that already have this stuff. And so the city that is not engineering this or attempting to is going to lose the future workforce. Yeah. They're just going to go to the Denvers and to the Austins or whatever it is because they have these types of places.
And it's funny because my son, he works at Southwest Reacher, and he out of college they had him in their Boulder campus, and he missed his family somewhat and everything, and her family's here, but they try to create that themselves because they have experienced that and everything. And my kids are kind of like, they like the outdoors, so they go to Fairchild Park to play pickleball, and then they'll go to Charity Bar, and they try to work their ways. But it's difficult to really have that kind of experience still in San Antonio.
Yes, Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are two cities. That we are two completely different cities. There is the urban core, which was built, 300 years ago, some parts of it. And then everything I would say outside of 410 was built on a city code, city engineer version of suburbia. Whereas in the urban core, you can have really cool retail stock that is that's the end of a neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, you would never go into a neighborhood where at the end of the neighborhood, you get to a store. Right, it's sort of they're over here, and then the power center, right, the Panera Bread and the Chili's is over here, and never the two shall meet. Whereas in the urban core, you walk in South Alamo, and you take one right from the friendly spot, and there's a house there. And I feel like those areas I think are the best places to start for this type of urbanism and walkability. But I do think the future is we need to rethink the suburban neighborhood. Because not everybody wants to be next to a bar, but there's plenty of everyday, day-to-day things that you could have in that model of the high street where you should be able to walk down and get your hair cut there and, maybe go to the laundromat there or get some produce or, there's so many other things or go to the gym. But right now we completely separate everything. And the cities that don't do that, people don't know why they love it, but that's one of the reasons they love it is because they're already doing that. They're building apartments with the retail on the bottom. And that's just a new version of what Europe did or Mexico City did, gajillions of years ago. And so we're just struggling to catch up.
Exactly like when you go to New York City, it's like that's what you see is you have all your retail stores and everything, and above them you have apartments and you're rent control and
that's exactly, and that's what I lived with. And I remember I moved back to San Antonio, and then Rackspace sent me back to London on a project, and I had a buddy who I met. His name is Ben Froen, really good guy. He was like one of the top camera guys in the UK. So if you watched the Royal Wedding, you were probably looking through his lens, and we met at the pub in my neighborhood, and we became lifelong friends, still are. And I remember I went back to visit, and he said, "Hey, stay at my flat. I got an extra room. Cool. Stayed at the flat." And he said, "We're gonna do steaks in honor of my Texan friend being back." And I remember we walked to the butcher shop, and he knew the guy by name. 3 steaks, one for me, my girlfriend, for Lorenzo. Then we went next door and we picked the 3 baked the potatoes for the baked potato, and then we went another little half a block away to get the bottle of wine. And I thought, oh, I didn't know I missed this until I was experiencing it. And I was mad. I was like, I want to do this in San Antonio, and I can't do this. Like if I had a friend visiting, I couldn't do this, and it really upset me. And now it's a little bit easier. You got things like the Pearl that are sort of heading in that direction.
Pullman
and I think
Market's a big with what they've got going on. That's a really cool place that they've got
I love
going.
it. Well, and my only critique is that it shouldn't take a independently wealthy billionaire like Kit Goldsberry to have to defy all the odds and, break all the rules and do it himself. It actually should be a lot easier. And that's why sort of the concept of what we're doing at Confluence Capital with my business partner is to sort of try to do these little micro districts where you don't have to have,
So talk more about these. When we talked before, you're trying to identify, you got a specific criteria that you're trying to identify for so you can kind of seed it.
Yes.
Act as the fertilizer to try to create these districts.
Yeah. So the way that I would describe it is, I first start with the problem. San Antonio is really bad at districts, And all the great cities of the world have awesome districts. And so I would say that we only have 4 mature districts, urban districts: the Pearl, the St. Mary's Strip, South Alamo, and the Riverwalk. But the Riverwalk is not for locals, so I would say we only have 3 that are for locals.
Yeah,
And I define a real district, as 10 or more places you can go to. And so what we're trying to do is to go in the 0 to 5. So how do we find anything that has the potential to achieve 5? And I'll just give you my favorite example. On South Presa in Lavaca, Southtown, there is a little area where Taco Haven is. And 2 years ago, there was nothing but them and Bliss, right? And in one calendar year, there was 4 bars that opened: Near Dark, Bar Ludvine, Hands Down, and McIntyre's in one calendar year. We have a property under contract there to make it 5, and then we just opened another building that we bought, and we moved a tenant in. That's a restaurant, but that does alcohol, and so now you have 6. It's within a quarter mile. So this is the other thing: is true walkability comes from short distances, and so the research shows no one walks more than a quarter mile. I would argue that you'll walk from a quarter mile to another little district, and then you'll keep hopping. But what we do in St. is we go really far out, spread out. And so it's a quarter mile, and then it's, do you have at least a couple things? Nobody wants to go to a district that has just 2 things, right? I'm like, I want to feel like I've got variety.
Choices.
6th Street, I would challenge anybody that's not in the bar world to name a single bar on 6th Street.
The comedy mothership, Joe Rogan's place.
Yeah. That's different. But because your brain says, I'm just going to
the district.
District, and then I'll find a bar there. And so you want, I think the number's 5. It's 5 or more. And the good thing is we don't have to own all 5. We own 2 assets, of the 6 that are there right now, which is great. And then the other thing is residential density. This is another thing we do really badly. I read a report that said that you need 2,500 residential units to support 1 city block of retail. And so you need the neighborhood. You need the neighbors in the neighborhood that are going to frequent these places and spend enough money to make them economically viable. And so this is what we're looking for in these microdistricts: is, this place has 3 good restaurants, let's try to go get the 4th and 5th one there. Or it's got 4, let's try to get number 5. Or, this has potential to be a good nightlife district or a fitness district. And so that's what our target is.
So really, you're trying to get the activities first to draw.
Yes.
If we build it, they're trying to create the districts of dreams. If we build it, you will come.
Well, this was my biggest learning when I was CEO of Geekdom and worked at 80/20. I was in the business of recruiting companies and people. And what I discovered was the thing that helped me recruit the most had nothing to do with tech. It had nothing to do with the job. Those are all table stakes. What had to do was livability. What moved the needle was livability. I remember there was a restaurant, I think we talked about this, Feast in Southtown. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I had a 100% close rate at Feast. I never lost a deal because we were the food was incredible, the music was great, the waiters were all hip, way hipper than me. And so the people I'm recruiting have to imagine themselves living in the thing. And so they go, I can imagine this. And then we're going to walk from there to the Friendly Spot, or we're going to walk to Hemisphere. And I was giving them a little glimpse of that urban experience in San Antonio so that they could put themselves in the story. And I think that's really, it's crazy. The economic development impact of one good bar is it's even almost hard to quantify. But that's what you need, because that's what people want. They just don't tell you.
Yeah.
They need to be able to see these things.
Interesting. It's funny that like one bar.
Yeah, and the other big thing which most people don't talk about, and this is the sleeping giant. And I don't know why people don't like to talk about it. I think it's taboo, but it's the whole idea of what, and I'm quoting a Harvard economist, marriage markets. So there was a great book that was very influential when I was doing this work with Graham downtown, and the book's called Triumph of the City. It's written by a Harvard economist named Ed Glazer, and the book is about why cities are man's greatest inventions. Mm-hmm. And I've read a lot of urban books, but I've never read one that had the guts to talk about. And he has this whole chapter, it's called Marriage Markets. And the paraphrase of it is this: the great cities of the world have a disproportionate pull on young single people because the statistical likelihood that they will meet their future mate and spouse is so high that they will overcome all objections and all obstacles to get there. Which is why right now in New York City, there's some 22-year-old.
All I can think of is the $5,000 rent in New York
City.
City.
Yes, it's $5,000 rent. And you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, "Oh, I got a great deal. Sure, it's $5,000, but we have one shared washer dryer in the basement of the whole building.
Nobody has a washer and
Nobody
dryer.
has a washer dryer." And you go like, "Are you is for 400 square feet?
No closet.
No closet.
No.
But the reason they're willing to overcome all those obstacles is because the density of young people is so crazy there that they go, it's worth it. If you're a young person and you look around and you go, I don't see
That's why the city's alive.
Exactly.
When you get old and married like me, you stay home and watch TV.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I had there's a pastor I used to.
I'm not married though.
Yeah. there's a pastor that I used to. He passed away a year ago, but he used to preach in Manhattan, and he had one of the greatest lines that I ever heard about this. He said, look, young people don't imagine themselves being, me, 44 or whatever, in my career. He said they imagine themselves being young, sexy, and hot. And the question is, what city do you imagine yourself being young, sexy, and hot in? And for a lot of young people, it's not San Antonio, Texas, right?
New York, Miami.
New York, Miami. I would say if we did a poll at the graduating class at Trinity or UT Austin, no one at UT is saying, I can't wait to pack up all my stuff, move this spring and move to San Antonio, Texas. Now, we're getting better, but we have a lot of work to do. And I think what moves the needle is good livability. That's what moves the needle. It is not, can I recruit the next Facebook here? Even though that's great, right? I mean, the world's changed now with remote, work, but I feel like you have to imagine yourself enjoying a city and living there and meeting people and having great relationships and meeting your best friends and things like that. And that's actually what, and San Antonio, I think, is in an inflection point.
Yeah.
And so a lot of political leaders are scared to advocate for this, because they think it means gentrification, or they think, oh, we're going to lose our culture. And you don't have to sacrifice any of those things. You can keep affordability. I mean, we need to build a lot more stuff, but I feel like the culture can remain. It's just how you execute the plan. But I think that this is really, it's a war for the future talent. But it's funny, nobody talks about, can you meet a best friend or your future spouse? I think these are the top two soft metrics that no one ever talks about.
Interesting.
Yeah. I had a data analyst at a huge company in San Antonio once tell me, he said, if you want to keep your young people, you got to help them find their boo. He said, if you help them find their boo, they'll never leave. And I was like, man,
I think
straight from Solomon's mouth.
5 words ago we had beta.
I'm dating myself.
We're dating ourselves.
Yes.
But I look forward. I'd love to have you come back on and talk more, especially about like getting what the city's doing.
Yeah.
We're talking about like the impact of like moving the arena downtown, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
That really can move the needle in this direction. I appreciate you coming on today, though.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm definitely, like I said, I want to have you sign this. This is, it's been a real pleasure. Anywhere they can follow you, anything that you want to plug and everything. I know that you do some speaking every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on all the socials. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok. So you can find me, Lorenzo Gomez or El Gomez 123. I think is majority of my handles. Or LorenzoGomez.com. I have everything linked on my website.
Awesome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Brad, we'll miss you. See you next time.